The fall of Eddard Stark had shattered the fragile peace of Westeros. His death was not the end of a single man's story, but the spark that set the Seven Kingdoms ablaze. The North Remembers opened the second season with darkness, ambition, and the unmistakable promise of war. King Joffrey Baratheon now sat on the Iron Throne, though he wore his crown with cruelty rather than honor. On his name day, he ordered a spectacle of brutality. Men were beaten, blood was spilled, and the crowd was forced to cheer while he mocked both life and death. By his side stood Queen Regent Cersei, whispering words to control her son's recklessness. But another figure stepped into the spotlight, Tyrion Lannister. Sent by his father Tywin to serve as Hand of the King, Tyrion's task was to temper Joffrey's sadism and restrain Cersei's schemes. His sharp tongue clashed with his sister's arrogance, foreshadowing the storm of politics and betrayal to come. Far from the capital, Robb Stark was hailed as king in the north. His victories against the Lannisters gave hope to his bannermen, and his capture of Jaime Lannister provided leverage. No longer was Robb the boy of Winterfell. He had become a commander whose name stirred both pride and fear. Yet Catelyn Stark warned him, swords alone would not win this war. The realm fractured further as new claimants rose. Stannis Baratheon declared his right as Robert's true heir, while Renly Baratheon gathered armies of his own. The War of the Five Kings had begun, and Robb's crown carried not just glory but peril. On the rocky island of Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon made his entrance into the game. Stern, unyielding, and consumed by justice, Stannis lacked charm but possessed relentless will. At his side was Melisandre, the mysterious Red Priestess of the Lord of Light. Her whispers of prophecy and fire twisted the course of his decisions. Stannis sent letters across the realm, declaring the truth. Joffrey was no son of Robert, but a product of Cersei and Jaime's incest. The revelation was poison poured into the veins of Westeros, shaking the foundations of the Lannisters' claim. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen wandered with only a handful of loyal followers. The Khalasar had scattered after Khal Drogo's death, leaving her weak and stranded. Yet she was not empty-handed. She bore 3 dragons, the first seen in generations. The Red Waste tested them all. Hunger gnawed at their strength, thirst cracked their lips, and despair shadowed their steps. But Daenerys cradled her dragons, whispering promises of kingdoms yet to come. "They are my children," she said. "They will grow, and I will take what is mine." Her path was no longer a dream. It was destiny forged in fire. At Castle Black, Jon Snow faced his own trials. News of his father's death had reached him, igniting grief and temptation. Yet his vows to the Night's Watch bound him. Under Lord Commander Mormont, Jon rode beyond the wall for the first time, into lands of snow and silence. Their destination was Craster's Keep, a place of uneasy refuge. Craster was a wildling, cruel and vile, who took his daughters as wives. Jon's sense of honor recoiled at the horror, but worse secrets lingered. Male children born to Craster's wives were offered to the woods, abandoned to powers older and darker than men. This revelation chilled Jon's blood more than the winter air. It was proof that legends of the dead walking were real. In King's Landing, Sansa Stark endured humiliation. Now Joffrey's betrothed, she was treated not as a lady but as a prisoner in silks. Each day her torment grew. She bowed, she smiled, she spoke soft words of loyalty, but behind her eyes flickered something dangerous. Survival was her armor, silence her sword. The episode laid the foundation for the season's great conflicts, the rise of new kings, Joffrey in King's Landing, Robb in the north, Stannis at Dragonstone, Renly in the Reach, and Balon Greyjoy plotting at the Iron Islands. Westeros was splitting apart under the weight of ambition, the shadow beyond politics. While men squabbled over thrones, the North whispered of older threats, the White Walkers, death itself stirring beyond the wall, the fire of destiny. In the Red Waste, Daenerys stood on the edge of despair, but carried within her the fire to change the world. The episode closed with parallel visions. Jon Snow, gazing into the frozen wilderness, and Daenerys, lifting her dragons to the burning sky. One bound by ice, the other by fire, both marked by fate, the world of men prepared for war. But greater forces, older than kings and crowns, stirred. The North remembers. The War of the Five Kings was no longer a looming threat, it was reality. Across Westeros and beyond, loyalties shifted, secrets festered, and the shadow of death grew longer. The Nightlands was an episode that explored betrayal, survival, and the darkness that crept both in men's hearts and beyond the wall. Beyond the wall, Jon Snow and the Night's Watch remained at Craster's Keep. It was there Jon uncovered the terrible truth about their host. Craster gave away his newborn sons to creatures in the woods. The revelation horrified him, confirming rumors of ancient pacts with dark forces. Lord Commander Mormont reminded Jon of the Watch's purpose. Our duty is not to the games of kings, but to the living. The moment underscored the contrast between the southern wars and the greater threat rising in the north. Meanwhile, Samwell Tarly formed a fragile bond with Gilly, one of Craster's daughter's wives. Gilly, terrified for her unborn child, confided in Sam that if her baby were a boy, his fate would be sealed. Jon's horror deepened, proof that Craster's monstrous bargain was real. In the capital, Sansa Stark endured humiliation as Joffrey's betrothed. Her father's death still haunted her, yet she was forced to play the role of loyal lady. Joffrey's cruelty was unchecked, and only Sandor Clegane, the Hound, showed her moments of reluctant protection. Tyrion Lannister, as newly appointed Hand of the King, began to assert his authority. He maneuvered through the poisonous politics of the small council, testing Pycelle, Baelish, and Varys with sharp words and sharper strategies. Tyrion's quick wit and pragmatism made him a dangerous new player. His presence infuriated Cersei, who bristled at her brother's attempts to curb her influence. King's Landing simmered like a cauldron, every glance and whisper heavy with threat. Far across the seas, Theon Greyjoy returned to the Iron Islands, after years as a ward of the Starks. He arrived at Pike expecting respect, but was greeted with scorn. His father, Balon Greyjoy, viewed him as a weakling corrupted by northern ways. Theon offered an alliance. Robb Stark sought Balon's ships to strengthen the Northern Rebellion. But Balon scoffed at the idea. "Why bow to wolves? We take what is ours." Theon's sense of belonging fractured. Rejected by his father, mocked by his sister Yara, he stood between two worlds, neither a true Stark nor a true Greyjoy. The seeds of betrayal began to take root in his heart. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon's claim to the Iron Throne grew louder. With him stood Melisandre, the Red Priestess, who spoke of the Lord of Light and prophecies of fire. Her whispers carried both allure and dread. Davos Seaworth, ever the loyal smuggler knight, remained uneasy about her influence. Stannis, rigid and unyielding, accepted her counsel with dangerous faith. The promise of shadow and flame hinted at powers that defied the realm's understanding, a sign that war would not be fought by swords alone. Disguised as a boy, Arya Stark traveled with Yoren's recruits toward the Wall. Among her companions were criminals, outcasts, and 3 enigmatic prisoners locked in a cage: Jaqen H'ghar, Rorge, and Biter. Their presence was unsettling, their future roles yet unknown. Arya revealed her identity to Yoren, who swore to protect her but urged her to guard her name. "A name is a dangerous thing," he warned. "Keep it hidden. Keep it safe." Arya's journey became more than survival. It became a test of secrecy, patience, and the hard lessons of war. Robb Stark, though victorious, knew strength of arms was not enough. To weaken the Lannisters, he sought alliances. He sent Catelyn to parley with Renly Baratheon, who now claimed a crown of his own. Robb's maturity as a leader shone through, still young but guided by both instinct and wisdom. Meanwhile, Jaime Lannister remained in Stark custody, a prize both valuable and dangerous. The young wolf held power, but also responsibility that could unravel with a single mistake. The Nightlands was shaped by choices of loyalty and betrayal. Jon Snow confronted the horror of Craster's pact. Torn between duty and morality, Theon faced the rejection of his family, his loyalty to the Starks wavering. Arya learned that survival required silence, secrecy, and sacrifice. Tyrion walked a razor's edge, loyal to his house but determined to outwit it. The bonds that held men together were tested, and the cracks revealed paths of treachery. The episode closed in chilling silence. In the snowy woods, one of Craster's abandoned infants was carried into the darkness. From the shadows emerged a White Walker, skin pale as ice, eyes glowing blue. With cold skeletal hands, it lifted the child and carried it away. The message was clear. While kings quarreled over crowns, a far older war stirred in the Nightlands. The War of Crowns deepened as alliances fractured, loyalties were tested, and the very meaning of identity came under fire. What is dead may never die was not simply the creed of the Ironborn, but a statement that echoed across every corner of Westeros. Old selves dying so that new ones could be born. Beyond the wall, Jon Snow wrestled with the horror of Craster's bargain. He had witnessed enough to confirm what the Night's Watch had long whispered. Craster gave his sons to the cold, inhuman creatures that haunted the woods. Jon's outrage boiled, but when he confronted Lord Commander Mormont, he was met with pragmatism instead of fury. Mormont admitted he had known. Craster's cruelty was the price of the Watch's fragile alliance with him. "We need his shelter, his knowledge," Mormont explained. "To survive beyond the wall, one must sometimes ally with monsters." Jon was forced to face a painful truth. Duty and morality often stood at odds. Meanwhile, Samwell Tarly grew closer to Gilly, one of Craster's wives' daughters. She begged for help, fearful that if her unborn child were a boy, it would be lost to the night. Sam's compassion burned with helplessness, and Jon's conflict grew heavier. The seeds of defiance were planted. In King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister demonstrated why wit could be sharper than any blade. Knowing that spies infested the Red Keep, he devised a clever trap. To 3 members of the small council, Pycelle, Baelish, and Varys, he told 3 different lies about where Princess Myrcella would be sent for marriage. When Queen Cersei confronted him with the exact plan given to Pycelle, Tyrion had his answer. Pycelle was the leak. The hand of the king wasted no time. He had the old Maester seized, stripped of dignity, and thrown in the dungeons. The message was clear. Tyrion would not be underestimated. Varys and Baelish took note, wary of the dwarf who now wielded power with precision. Tyrion, once mocked for his stature, was proving himself a master of the capital's deadly game. Sansa Stark remained trapped in her gilded cage. Before the court and the people, Joffrey continued to humiliate her. Yet Sansa endured, hiding her fear behind polite words and lowered eyes. Her silence was no longer weakness, it was survival. Only Sandor Clegane, the Hound, showed her occasional slivers of humanity, but even his comfort was twisted, a reminder that in King's Landing, kindness often came in cruel forms. Across the seas, Theon Greyjoy faced the greatest test of his life. Returning to the Iron Islands, he sought to prove himself both to his father Balon and to his sister Yara. Robb Stark's offer of alliance had been placed in his hands, yet Balon spat on the notion of bending to wolves. "You are not a Stark," Balon declared. "You are a Greyjoy." Theon's identity split down the middle. Torn between the foster family that had treated him as a son and the blood family that scorned his years away, he stood on the edge of betrayal. In the end, Theon submitted to his father's will. Through the ritual of the drowned god, he embraced the creed of his people. What is dead may never die. It was both a baptism and a burial, the death of the Stark ward, and the rebirth of Theon Greyjoy, heir of Pike. In the Reach, Catelyn Stark arrived at the camp of Renly Baratheon. What she found was a king with charm and spectacle, surrounded by thousands of banners and swords. Renly, unlike his brother Stannis, wielded charisma. His marriage to Margaery Tyrell had secured the powerful Tyrell alliance, though it was not love but strategy that bound them. Margaery herself revealed her sharpness, subtly guiding Renly with ambition that belied her youth. Her brother Loras, the Knight of Flowers, stood ever at Renly's side, bound by loyalty and love. Catelyn pleaded for unity, for Stark and Baratheon to stand together. But beneath Renly's campfire songs and bright banners lay the inevitable truth. He and Stannis would never reconcile. Pride and ambition would set brother against brother, and Westeros would bleed for it. On the road north, Arya Stark continued her dangerous journey with Yoren's recruits. But danger found them sooner than expected. Lannister forces ambushed the group, demanding Gendry Yoren, defiant to the last, stood against them. He fought bravely, giving Arya and the others precious moments. Yet even his courage was not enough. He fell, slain in the mud, a man who had lived and died by his vows. For Arya, it was another wound carved into her young soul. Yet even in chaos, she adapted. To protect Gendry, she tricked the Lannister soldiers, pointing to a fallen boy and claiming he was their target. Her quick thinking spared her friend, but the cost was blood and grief. Every thread of the episode echoed the same theme: transformation through loss. Jon Snow began to question the morality of the Watch, reshaping his sense of duty. Tyrion shed the image of the underestimated dwarf. Reborn as a cunning power player, Theon killed his Stark self and was reborn as a Greyjoy. Arya shed more innocence, growing sharper in the face of cruelty. Renly showed that even kingship could be a mask. Fashioned by marriage and alliances, the creed of the Ironborn became a truth for all. What they once were had to die, so that something harder, sharper, and more enduring could live. The episode ended with Arya, shaken but resolute, staring at the flames consuming Yoren's body. She did not cry. Instead, she buried the grief deep inside, another stone in the wall she was building around her heart. In the background, the Ironborn words echoed like a prophecy across all of Westeros: what is dead may never die. War revealed its ugliest truths in this episode. Garden of Bones was a descent into cruelty, desperation, and sorcery, where power was won not only by armies but also by shadows and fear. Every scene peeled back another layer of Westeros brutality, showing that the Game of Thrones was no longer bound by the laws of men. The episode opened with the aftermath of battle. Robb Stark's forces had triumphed over the Lannisters once more, but victory was drenched in blood. Robb surveyed the wounded, watching as men screamed, limbs shattered, and lives ebbed away. One Lannister soldier, mortally wounded, begged for mercy. Robb granted it with a swift blade, his face torn between compassion and the burden of command. This moment captured the cruel paradox of leadership. Even mercy demanded violence. Catelyn reminded her son that he was no longer just a commander, but a king. Every choice he made carried the weight of thousands. Robb's victories elevated him, but they also bound him tighter to a destiny he could not escape. In King's Landing, Joffrey Baratheon showed the depths of his cruelty. Publicly, he humiliated Sansa Stark, threatening her with death and subjecting her to violence. Sansa endured, holding her composure as best she could until Tyrion Lannister intervened. As Hand of the King, Tyrion shielded her with sharp words and political cunning, forcing Joffrey to retreat. But Joffrey's malice was not quenched. In one of the most disturbing scenes, he summoned Ross and another prostitute to his chambers, ordering them to inflict violence on each other for his amusement. The act revealed him not only as a boy king drunk on power, but as a sadist whose cruelty knew no bounds. Elsewhere, Arya Stark and Yoren's surviving recruits were dragged to Harrenhal. The ruined castle had become a prison where captives were tortured to death, their screams echoing through its charred halls. Arya watched as men were burned and broken, their bones turned to ash. Each death scarred her further, hardening her resolve. Arya, already marked by the loss of her father and the massacre of her companions, now bore witness to suffering that no child should endure. But she adapted. When soldiers demanded to know which boy was Gendry, Arya cleverly pointed to another dead child, deflecting suspicion. Her cunning preserved Gendry's life, showing her growing ability to navigate cruelty with intelligence and instinct. On the southern fields, Renly Baratheon and his vibrant host came face to face with his older brother Stannis. The contrast was stark. Renly's camp was alive with banners, music, and youthful confidence, bolstered by the Tyrell alliance. Stannis stood grim and rigid, Melisandre at his side like a shadow. The brothers exchanged words as bitter as any battle. Stannis demanded Renly's loyalty, claiming the Iron Throne by right of birth. Renly mocked him, dismissing his claim with arrogance and laughter. Their feud was irreconcilable, and Catelyn Stark, present as envoy, realized no Stark diplomacy could bridge such a rift. The seeds of fratricidal war were firmly sown. On the Iron Islands, Theon Greyjoy made his final choice. Pressured by his father Balon, mocked by his sister Yara, he turned away from his foster family, the Starks. In a ritual of the drowned god, Theon was symbolically reborn into the faith and culture he had long been estranged from. Theon's decision sealed his betrayal. He would no longer be the ward of Winterfell, but the heir of Pike. His loyalties shifted, and with them, the fate of the North darkened. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen and her diminished Khalasar trudged through the Red Waste. Hunger gnawed. Thirst cracked their lips and despair clung to them. Her dragons, small and frail, clung to her for warmth and food, symbols of both weakness and promise. At last, the walls of Korth appeared, a city said to be the greatest in the world. Hope flickered in her followers' eyes. Daenerys, unbowed by her suffering, declared that her children, the dragons, would grow, and with them her destiny. Qarth was not just a city. It was survival and a chance for rebirth. The episode's climax unfolded in a cave near Storm's End. Davos Seaworth, loyal but uneasy, ferried Melisandre into the darkness. There, the Red Priestess revealed the terrifying truth of her power. Amid groans and cries, Melisandre gave birth, not to a child, but to a living shadow. The creature slid from her body, black and formless, yet alive with menace. It was a weapon born of sorcery, proof that the coming war would not be fought by swords alone. Davos recoiled in horror, realizing that Stannis' cause was now bound to powers beyond comprehension. The Shadow's arrival marked the dawn of a new kind of battle, where magic, death and faith collided, Garden of Bones stripped. Away the illusions of glory and honor. Robb's compassion clashed with the brutal weight of kingship. Joffrey revealed power corrupted into cruelty. Arya lost more innocence, learning survival through cunning. Theon betrayed his foster family to embrace his bloodline. Daenerys clung to hope through her dragon Stannis, wielded dark sorcery as a weapon of war. The title itself spoke to the legacy of conflict. In the end, battlefields were nothing but gardens of bones, where ambition fertilized the soil with blood and ash. The episode closed with the shadow creature gliding through the cave, its form unnatural, its intent lethal. The image lingered, a whisper of what was to come, proof that the Game of Thrones had crossed into realms of nightmare. From that moment it was clear, war in Westeros would no longer be decided by men alone. Shadow's faith and fire would shape its future. Death and betrayal haunted every corner of this episode. The ghost of Harrenhal showed how swiftly power could change hands, and how shadows, both real and metaphorical, shaped the fate of Westeros. From Renly's sudden end to Arya's new deadly ally, the episode revealed that ghosts were not always the dead. They were also the choices and secrets that lingered. The episode opened with shock. In his brightly lit tent, Renly Baratheon stood with Catelyn Stark and Brienne of Tarth when the shadow creature birthed by Melisandre appeared. Silent, dark and swift, the figure pierced Renly's heart. He collapsed without a cry, slain not by steel but by sorcery. Brienne, loyal to the end, tried to fight the shadow but was powerless. Guards rushed in, accusing her of the murder. In grief and fury, she cut them down. Catelyn urged her to flee. "You cannot die here. Renly is gone, but you must live to serve." Brienne, heartbroken, swore her loyalty to Catelyn. From that moment, their fates became bound. Renly's death shattered the balance of power. His once mighty host splintered, with many bannermen flocking to Stannis. The Tyrells, however, withdrew, calculating where their ambitions might next find purchase. With Renly dead, Stannis Baratheon absorbed much of his brother's strength. Melisandre's shadow had cleared his path, though at a terrible moral cost. Davos Seaworth watched uneasily, his faith in Stannis shaken. "You won by sorcery," he reminded his king, warning that such victories carried curses of their own. But Stannis remained unmoved. For him, justice and destiny were absolute. The Iron Throne was his by right, and with Melisandre whispering of the Lord of Light, he pressed forward, preparing to march on King's Landing. In the capital, word of Renly's death unsettled the court. Cersei sought to fortify her son's rule, but Tyrion Lannister maneuvered with sharper intent. Stannis was coming, and the city needed more than swords, it needed weapons of terror. Tyrion discovered wildfire, a volatile green substance capable of incinerating armies and stone alike. Alchemists promised it could destroy fleets and turn battlefields into infernos. Cersei saw it as a shield. Tyrion saw it as a blade. He took control of the stores, ensuring that when fire fell, it would fall at his command. At Harrenhal, Arya Stark's fortunes shifted. Once just another prisoner, she caught the eye of Tywin Lannister, who mistook her wit and sharpness for useful intelligence. Tywin brought her into his service, never guessing her true identity. Their conversations were a dance of secrets, Arya careful, clever, and quietly defiant. Yet her greatest turn came with Jaqen H'ghar. Arya had saved him and 2 others when Yoren's caravan was attacked. Now Jaqen repaid the debt. He offered her a bargain, 3 lives, 1 for each he owed. Speak a name and that person would die. Arya tested the promise. Naming one of Harrenhal's torturers, she soon saw him dead, struck down as though by fate itself. The gift of death was real, and Arya had gained a weapon unlike any sword. On the Iron Islands, Theon Greyjoy made his decision. To prove his loyalty to his father, he embraced Balon's command, attack the north. Theon, once a foster son of Winterfell, now plotted to seize it. His betrayal was not yet seen by the Starks, but the shadow of it loomed. Theon's transformation was complete. No longer the conflicted ward, he declared himself Greyjoy, heir of Pike. Ready to carve his name in blood across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen and her weary followers reached the walls of Korth. At first denied entry, they were saved by the intervention of Xaro Shoan Daxos, a wealthy merchant of the 13. He invoked a blood oath to open the gates. Korth dazzled with its wealth and beauty, a stark contrast to the barren waste Daenerys had endured. But behind its splendor lay intrigue. Her dragons drew awe and calculation in equal measure. In Korth, Daenerys found not just refuge but the beginnings of a new political battlefield. North of the Wall, Jon Snow and the Night's Watch pressed deeper into wildling lands. Craster's secret gnawed at Jon, but duty bound him to silence. The Watch's mission was no longer simple ranging. It was reconnaissance for the war to come. The land whispered of gathering wildling armies and darker things beyond. The episode revolved around ghosts, not only the dead, but the choices and shadows haunting every character. Renly became a ghost, slain by magic, his ambitions extinguished in an instant. Stannis carried the ghost of sorcery on his conscience. Though he denied its weight, Tyrion wielded wildfire, a ghost of fire that promised devastation. Arya called upon death itself, wielding ghosts as her allies. Theon betrayed his past, becoming a ghost to Winterfell's trust. Daenerys entered Korth, her dragons ghostly reminders of a bygone age reborn. Ghosts were no longer whispers of the past, they were tools of power in the present. The episode closed on Harrenhal's grim walls. Arya, once powerless, now held death in her grasp. With each name she might speak, another ghost would rise. Harrenhal's ghost was not its burnt towers or tortured screams. It was Arya herself, moving unseen, shaping fate with whispered names. Chaos erupted across Westeros as loyalties shifted, betrayals deepened, and the faith of men and women, whether in old gods or new, was tested. The Old Gods and the New was an episode that showcased the fragility of crowns, the wrath of the common people, and the dangerous bargains made in the name of power. The episode opened with the shocking betrayal of Theon Greyjoy. Leading a small band of Ironborn raiders, Theon seized Winterfell with ease, catching the garrison off guard. The home of House Stark fell not to an invading army, but to one who had once been raised among them. Theon proclaimed himself Lord of Winterfell. His hollow claim rang bitter in the ears of the Northerners, who still viewed him as an outsider. In a desperate bid to prove authority, Theon executed Ser Rodrik Cassel in front of the townsfolk. The scene was brutal and clumsy. Theon's inexperience and desperation were laid bare as his sword struck again and again to finish the deed. The beheading silenced the crowd, but the silence carried not respect, only simmering hatred. In King's Landing, the people's suffering could no longer be contained. As Joffrey, Cersei, Tyrion, and Sansa paraded through the streets, the starving crowd hurled insults, dung, and stones. Fury boiled into full rebellion. Joffrey, ever cruel, demanded vengeance, screaming for his guards to kill the rioters. His arrogance only fueled the chaos. Soldiers clashed with the mob, but order collapsed. Amid the violence, Sansa was pulled into an alley by attackers. Her life hung by a thread, until Sandor Clegane the Hound burst through, cutting men down and carrying her to safety. In his rough, terrifying way, he became her reluctant protector once again. Meanwhile, Tyrion turned his rage on Joffrey. "You are a fool," he spat, striking the boy king across the face. In that moment it was clear. King's Landing was not merely threatened from without by Stannis' army, but from within by the wrath of its own people. At Harrenhal, Arya Stark continued to serve Tywin Lannister. Their scenes crackled with tension. Tywin, sharp-eyed and ruthless, recognized her intelligence. He questioned her about the North, about her supposed origins, and though Arya lied with skill, she risked exposure with every word. Meanwhile, her secret ally, Jaqen H'ghar, pressed her to give him another name. Arya obliged, naming one of Tywin's men. Soon after, the man was found dead. Jaqen's power was undeniable, and Arya's hands were now stained with the choices she made. The balance of fear and control shifted. Arya was no longer a powerless girl. She was learning the currency of death. Beyond the wall, Jon Snow encountered Ygritte, a wildling woman whose spirit clashed with his discipline. Capturing her in battle, Jon chose to spare her life, intending to bring her back to camp. But Ygritte was no helpless captive. With wit and fire, she mocked his vows, his order, and his faith in the Seven Kingdoms. Their long trek together set the stage for something more than a prisoner and her captor. Ygritte became the first wildling to truly challenge Jon's beliefs, planting the seeds of doubt that would one day grow into rebellion within his own heart. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen sought allies in Korth. Her dragons were still small, but they were her greatest strength and her greatest vulnerability. She displayed them before the city's elite, demanding ships and men to reclaim her throne, yet suspicion followed her at every step. Xaro Daxos offered marriage, promising wealth and protection in exchange for power. But the warlocks of Korth, led by Pyat Pri, began to circle her with interest of their own. The gilded halls of Qarth glittered with luxury, but danger lurked in every shadow. For Daenerys it was clear. In this city, survival would depend on more than dragons. Far from home, Robb Stark led his forces with growing renown. Yet it was not battle that defined his scenes, but a new connection. He met again with Talisa, the healer who tended the wounded. Her sharp tongue and compassion struck something in Robb. Between them, sparks of affection began to form, though Robb's duty to House Stark and his marriage pact to the Freys loomed over him like a sword. The title, The Old Gods and the New, reflected the collision of faiths and loyalties shaping Westeros. Theon's betrayal of Winterfell showed how blood and oaths could be broken for ambition. The riots in King's Landing revealed that kings ruled only as long as the people allowed them to. Arya's pact with Jaqen blurred the line between justice and vengeance, mortality and divinity. Jon Snow's encounter with Ygritte exposed the fragile nature of vows before the raw power of freedom. Daenerys' struggle in Qarth showed that even with dragons, she must navigate faith, politics, and deceit. The old gods whispered in forests. The new gods reigned in septs and in Qarth. Stranger powers of fire and shadow stirred. Each faith demanded loyalty. Each carried consequences. The episode ended with Theon standing in Winterfell's courtyard, cloaked in the mantle of lordship he did not deserve. The Northerners bowed with clenched jaws, their hatred hidden behind lowered eyes. Theon had won Winterfell, but his victory rang hollow. He was lord of stone walls, not of hearts. And in the distance, the old gods of the north, silent, watchful, weirwood faces carved in ancient trees, seemed to wait, patient as ever, for justice to come. This episode peeled back the layers of loyalty, betrayal, and the fragile mask of honor. A man without honor was not about battles won on fields of steel, but about the struggles within hearts, the lies men tell, and the price of pride. Winterfell was under the banner of a usurper. Theon Greyjoy, once a ward of House Stark, now ruled as its master. Yet beneath the thin veneer of power lay desperation. He barked orders, demanded obedience, but the people of Winterfell did not see a lord. They saw a betrayer. When Bran and Rickon escaped with Osha's cunning aid, Theon's authority crumbled further. Humiliated, he unleashed brutal searches, burning farms and slaughtering innocents in pursuit of the boys. But no trace was found. To reassert control, Theon staged a cruel deception. 2 charred child's bodies were hung before Winterfell's gates. He claimed them as Bran and Rickon. The sight broke the spirit of Winterfell's people, who wept for the young heirs. Yet the act revealed Theon's truth. Not a conqueror, but a boy cloaked in borrowed armor, wielding fear instead of loyalty. In King's Landing, Sansa Stark faced her own awakening. A dream turned to nightmare when she awoke covered in blood. Her first moon blood had come. Panic set in, for it meant she was now of age to bear Joffrey's children. Cersei visited her, delivering words that were half warning, half confession. "Love is weakness," she said. For Cersei, womanhood was a chain, and she taught Sansa to wear it as armor. The conversation revealed the bitterness of a queen who had lived her life as both a pawn and a player. Meanwhile, Tyrion continued his attempts to control Joffrey. Yet the boy king's cruelty only deepened. Tyrion saw the truth. The greatest threat to the Lannisters was not Stannis or Robb Stark, but Joffrey himself. At Harrenhal, Arya Stark served Tywin Lannister. Their exchanges were sharp, filled with suspicion and wit. Tywin recognized intelligence in her, the kind no common servant would possess. Yet he did not pry too deeply, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps because he found her honesty refreshing amidst liars and flatterers. Arya, however, carried her secret weapon, Jaqen H'ghar. With 2 lives already claimed, 1 name remained. Arya dreamed of whispering Tywin's name, ending the war with a single word. But fear, uncertainty, and survival held her back. Her hesitation revealed a truth: power carries responsibility. And Arya was still learning how heavy death could be when wielded. Far north, Jon Snow struggled with his first true test beyond the wall. Capturing the wildling Ygritte, he tried to march her back to his brothers. But Ygritte's spirit was as untamed as the land itself. She mocked him, taunted him, questioned his vows. As night fell, cold forced them together. Jon lay stiff, bound by honor, while Ygritte curled against him, whispering provocations. Their closeness was both dangerous and intimate. For Jon, the wall had always been a shield of stone. Ygritte showed him another truth, that freedom and desire could break any vow. This encounter was more than a clash of prisoner and captor. It was the first spark of something that would burn through Jon's very soul. Across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen's grief turned to fury. Her dragons had been stolen. Without them, she felt stripped bare, less a queen, more a beggar. Her suspicions fell upon Xaro Shoan Daxos and the warlock Pyat Pri. Pyat revealed his hand, inviting her to the House of the Undying. "There you will find what you have lost," he promised with a chilling smile. Daenerys raged. "Where are my dragons?" she cried, her voice echoing through Korth's gilded halls. The city's opulence mocked her desperation. Yet her anger showed her growth. She would not bow, not even here. Her path was dangerous, but her resolve unshaken. Back in the Stark camp, Jaime Lannister languished as prisoner. Still arrogant, still venom-tongued, he insulted his captors and mocked their honor. Yet his chains did not silence his will. In the night, Jaime attempted escape, killing a guard in the process. He was soon recaptured, dragged back bloodied and beaten. The act sent shockwaves through the camp. The Kingslayer's presence was both a prize and a poison. Every day he lived, the Stark camp risked ruin. Catelyn Stark watched with growing dread. She saw the divisions Jaime's presence created, the vengeance he inspired. The thought began to take root. Perhaps releasing him under her own terms would serve her family better than keeping him caged. The episode asked a single question: what is honor? Theon wore no honor, only the mask of it, using lies and cruelty to maintain control. Sansa faced womanhood with forced dignity, trapped by a role she never chose. Arya weighed honor against survival, realizing that names carry blood. Jon wrestled with his vows, discovering that honor falters before human desire. Daenerys sought to preserve the honor of her claim, even as Korth's intrigues tried to strip it from her. Jaime, the Kingslayer, mocked honor itself, wearing infamy like a crown. In each storyline, honor was either tested, corrupted, or abandoned. The episode ended in Winterfell's courtyard. Smoke curled into the night sky, carrying the stench of charred flesh. Two small bodies, blackened and broken, hung above the gates. Theon stood below them, chest puffed, eyes hard. He claimed victory, he claimed rule, but his eyes betrayed him. There was no triumph there, only fear and doubt. For Theon Greyjoy had become the very title of the episode, a man without honor. This episode laid the groundwork for the storms to come. The Prince of Winterfell was not about great battles, but about the fragile victories and bitter betrayals that reshaped the War of the Five Kings. It was a chapter where every triumph felt hollow, and every decision carried the weight of looming ruin. Theon Greyjoy stood as self-proclaimed Prince of Winterfell, but his crown was made of ash. He had hung the charred bodies of two children, declaring them to be Bran and Rickon Stark. The sight cowed the people of Winterfell into silence, but their eyes burned with hatred. Theon mistook their fear for respect, but respect was far from his reach. When Yara arrived, her words cut him deeper than any sword. "You've won a toy castle," she sneered, "and doomed us all to stark vengeance." She saw what Theon refused to admit. His conquest was not for House Greyjoy, but for his own fragile pride. Theon tried to mask his fear with arrogance, but his rule was crumbling from within. Even his own men doubted him. whispering that they had followed a boy who wanted to play at being king. In the capital, tension grew as Stannis Baratheon's fleet sailed closer. The city braced for siege. Tyrion Lannister, sharp and pragmatic, took command of preparations. His weapon of choice, wildfire, the volatile green flame. He plotted its use with careful precision, knowing it could turn the tide of war or consume the city itself. Cersei, however, saw wildfire differently, and her conversations with Tyrion were like knives cloaked in silk. She resented his authority, resented his wit, and above all resented that he held the keys to the city's survival. Joffrey, puffed with false courage, boasted of leading the defense personally. Tyrion mocked him, promising to put him in the vanguard. A jest that revealed a darker truth. Joffrey's crown was gilded fear, and Tyrion knew it. In the north, Robb Stark balanced victories on the battlefield with turmoil at home. His feelings for Talisa deepened, and their bond grew ever stronger. Yet beneath that warmth lay a shadow, his betrothal to House Frey, a political pact his heart now threatened to betray. Meanwhile, Catelyn Stark made a fateful choice. Against her son's will, she released Jaime Lannister into the custody of Brienne of Tarth. For Catelyn, the risk was worth it if it meant saving her daughters. But Robb's bannermen seethed with anger. To them, Jaime was the prize of war, a hostage too valuable to lose. Catelyn's act was seen as betrayal, an act of love that risked tearing her son's cause apart. Arya Stark's cunning once again turned the tables at Harrenhal. With Jaqen H'ghar's third death owed to her, she made an impossible demand, his own life. Jaqen, bound by his word, found himself trapped by Arya's cleverness. Instead of death, he offered her another way, safe escape. That night, Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie slipped from Harrenhal under Jaqen's quiet protection. As she vanished into the night, Arya was no longer merely a girl running from war. She was a girl who had bent death itself to her will. Beyond the wall, Jon Snow's situation worsened. His attempt to bring Ygritte back as a prisoner ended in failure. Surrounded by wildlings, Jon was taken captive instead. Fargreet's triumphant smirk told the story. The hunter had become the hunted. This turn of fate placed Jon deeper into the world of the free folk, where his vows and identity as a man of the Night's Watch would be tested like never before. In Korth, Daenerys Targaryen's fury only grew. Her dragons had been stolen, and the city's glittering wealth could not mask its treachery. She confronted Zaroshon Daxos, who again offered marriage and protection. But Daenerys refused to trade her future for safety. Her words were sharp. "I will take what is mine with fire and blood." Her suspicions soon proved true. Pyat Pri, the warlock, revealed himself as the thief. He lured Daenerys to the House of the Undying, promising her dragons awaited her there. The path ahead was dangerous, but Daenerys had no choice. Her children were her power, her destiny. The Prince of Winterfell revolved around the illusions of power. Theon held Winterfell, but the walls mocked him, and his own men doubted him. Tyrion wielded wildfire, but the flames threatened to consume more than just Stannis' fleet. Robb won battles, but love risked undoing his alliances. Catelyn freed Jaime, her choice born of love but seen as betrayal. Arya escaped, proving that wit could achieve what swords could not. Jon was captured, his vows shackled by wildling hands. Daenerys marched toward the House of the Undying, where illusions would be made flesh. Every victory was laced with poison, every triumph a step toward collapse. The episode closed on Theon in Winterfell's courtyard. He stood atop the walls, surveying the silent crowd below. He imagined himself a prince, a ruler feared and respected. But the silence was heavy, hostile. His people bowed because they had no choice, not because they followed him. Theon Greyjoy, Prince of Winterfell, was a prince in name only, a usurper perched on borrowed stones, haunted by the knowledge that both the Starks and the North itself would one day rise against him. Blackwater was the first full-scale battle episode in Game of Thrones, and it delivered a spectacle of fire, fear, and fragile courage. Set entirely in King's Landing, it showed not only the clash of armies, but the true nature of the men and women behind the walls. Some rose to greatness, some fell into cowardice, and some revealed that victory often comes at the cost of honor. In the dark of night, Stannis Baratheon's fleet advanced toward King's Landing. Hundreds of ships glided across the water, oars dipping in unison. The silence was ominous, broken only by the crash of waves. For Stannis, the Iron Throne was his by right. For Davos Seaworth, who commanded the fleet, the mission was duty, but dread lingered in his heart. He knew the city would not fall without resistance. The Baratheon banners snapped in the sea wind, and the soldiers whispered prayers to gods old and new. None could predict that the greatest fire ever unleashed on Westeros awaited them. Inside the city, tension was thick as smoke. Commoners trembled, nobles whispered, and the Red Keep prepared for siege. Cersei Lannister did not trust steel to protect her. Instead, she carried a vial of poison, ready to end her life and her children's, rather than let them fall into enemy hands. Sansa Stark, trapped in the Queen's company, endured Cersei's venomous lessons. "Women's weapons are between their legs," Cersei told her coldly. To Sansa, the words were both terrifying and disheartening. This was not the life of songs and gallant knights. This was survival in a world ruled by cruelty. Amid the fear, Tyrion Lannister emerged as the true leader of King's Landing. Small in stature but vast in cunning, he organized the defense. His greatest weapon, wildfire, a volatile green substance capable of destroying entire fleets. On the eve of battle, Tyrion gave a speech to his soldiers. He did not speak of honor or glory. Instead, he spoke of survival. "If the city falls, your wives will be raped, your children butchered. Fight today because there is no other choice." His words struck home, and men who had trembled now lifted their swords. The first clash came at sea. Stannis' massive fleet approached the bay, but only one small ship sailed forward. Davos, watching from his deck, realized too late what it carried. The ship was unmanned, its hold filled with wildfire. A single flaming arrow struck and the night erupted. A green inferno consumed the waters, swallowing ships whole. Men screamed as they burned, and the sea itself seemed to boil. Davos was thrown into the chaos, his son lost to the flames. But Stannis did not falter. His face, grim and unyielding, commanded the survivors forward. Where others would retreat, Stannis pressed on, ordering his men to the shore. On land, the Baratheon soldiers stormed the gates and scaled the walls. Joffrey, dressed in golden armor, strutted as if he were a hero of legend. Yet as soon as the battle grew fierce, his mask slipped. Panic overtook him, and at Cersei's command he abandoned the walls, leaving his men leaderless. Morale crumbled. In that desperate moment, Tyrion rose again. He did what no other dared. He led the charge himself. With fire and steel around him, he rallied the defenders. "They say I'm half a man," he cried. "What does that make you?" His bravery ignited the Lannister troops, and together they pushed back the assault. But victory had a price. In the chaos, Sir Mandon Moore, a member of the King's Guard, turned on Tyrion. With cold betrayal, he slashed at the hand of the king. Tyrion fell, his face sliced open, his life hanging by a thread. While battle raged outside, inside the castle, Cersei prepared for defeat. She gathered the women in Maegor's holdfast, speaking with bitter cynicism. Holding her youngest son, Tommen, she whispered that better death awaited than capture. Meanwhile, Sansa prayed quietly. In the shadows, Sandor Clegane, the Hound, found her. Shaken by the fire raging beyond the walls, he renounced his service to the king. "The city's yours if you want it," he told her, offering to take her away. For the first time, Sansa saw the man behind the Hound's mask, broken, bitter, yet oddly protective. Still, she refused to leave. Outside, Stannis himself fought among his men, sword in hand, proving that unlike Joffrey, he was no coward. His soldiers pressed deeper, even reaching the walls. Victory seemed within his grasp, and then the tide shifted. From the darkness rode Tywin Lannister, leading fresh troops. By his side were the Tyrells, newly allied through marriage promises and shared ambition. Their arrival crushed Stannis' advance. Inside the throne room, Cersei prepared to kill Tommen with poison. Just as she lifted the vial, the doors burst open. Tywin entered, announcing victory. "The battle is over. We have won." Blackwater was built on contrasts. Stannis, relentless and unyielding, compared to Joffrey, who fled Tyrion, marked as half a man, proved greater than all. The wildfire, both savior and horror, turned the sea into hell. Betrayal struck even in victory, as Tyrion was nearly slain by his own guard. Cersei's maternal love twisted into despair, as she nearly poisoned her child. Courage and cowardice danced side by side, and betrayal lay waiting in every shadow. The episode ended with fire still burning on the bay, green flames licking the night sky. Bodies floated in the water, ships smoldered, and the cries of the dying echoed. Stannis had been beaten back, but his will remained unbroken. In the Red Keep, Tyrion lay unconscious, bleeding from his wound, forgotten in the victory he had secured. Joffrey claimed the glory. Cersei clutched her children, and Tywin basked in triumph. The city was safe for now. But the cost of survival was written in fire and blood. Valor Morghulis, all men must die. The title of the season's final episode was not merely a phrase, but a grim reminder of the truths that govern Westeros. In the aftermath of Blackwater, crowns shifted, alliances fractured, and new paths opened. The finale wove together victory, betrayal, visions, and omens of the greater war to come. Though it was Tyrion Lannister's cunning that saved King's Landing, the glory did not fall on him. Wounded from Sir Mandon Moore's betrayal during the battle, Tyrion lay in bed with his face scarred. Yet the deeper wound was political. Tywin Lannister entered the city as savior, and the Tyrells joined the Lannisters in triumph. Tyrion, once Hand of the King, was dismissed and left with nothing. His allies slipped away, and even his family ignored his role in victory. Only Shae remained, urging him to escape with her. Tyrion, however, refused. He would not abandon the game, not yet. Still, he understood the truth. In King's Landing, victory often meant obscurity, and survival was its own reward. In the throne room, Joffrey publicly rewarded his new allies. At the urging of Loras Tyrell, he cast aside his betrothal to Sansa Stark and promised to wed Margaery Tyrell instead. The announcement sealed the alliance between the Lannisters and the Tyrells, binding the Reach to the Iron Throne. Sansa struggled to conceal her relief. Freed from marriage to the sadistic king, she allowed herself a fleeting smile. But Littlefinger approached her with chilling words. "You may be free of him as a husband, but you are not free of his cruelty." Sansa realized that her reprieve was fragile, and that King's Landing remained a cage with gilded bars. Far to the north, Robb Stark chose love over duty. Against his mother's counsel, he wed Talisa in secret. It was a union born of passion, not politics. Yet it was also a breaking of oaths. Robb had been pledged to House Frey. This moment of happiness was shadowed by inevitability. The seeds of betrayal and tragedy were sown, though Robb did not yet see them. In Talisa's eyes he found strength, but in the eyes of his bannermen he risked the crown for a single heart. Meanwhile, Jaime Lannister traveled south under Brienne of Tarth's watchful eye. Their journey was filled with barbs and mockery, Jaime using words as weapons, while Brienne answered with steadfast silence. Yet beneath their clash grew a begrudging respect. When they encountered dead Stark soldiers and hostile men, Brienne's ferocity became clear. Jaime, bound and captive, witnessed firsthand her unyielding loyalty and skill. The Kingslayer, for all his pride, began to see her as more than a mere jailer. On Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon reeled from his crushing defeat. His fleet destroyed, his men scattered. He raged at Melisandre. In fury, he even seized her throat, blaming her sorcery for his downfall. But Melisandre showed him visions in the flames, visions of a war yet to come, of darkness and fire. Stannis faltered, caught between doubt and destiny. Slowly he yielded to her words once more. His path, though bloodied, was not ended. With Melisandre, he embraced the belief that he had been chosen by the Lord of Light. In the woods, Arya Stark, along with Gendry and Hot Pie, crossed paths with Jaqen H'ghar one last time. Arya was reluctant to part ways with him, but Jaqen offered her a gift, a small iron coin. "If the day comes when you must find me again, give it to any man of Braavos and say these words, Valar Morghulis." Arya did not yet understand its power, but she accepted it. With the coin, her journey expanded beyond the walls of Westeros into something older, stranger, and far deadlier. In Korth, Daenerys Targaryen entered the House of the Undying to reclaim her dragons. The warlock Pyat Pri ensnared her with visions. She walked through corridors of illusion, where time and reality blurred. She saw the throne room of the Red Keep, shattered and snow-covered, a haunting vision of Westeros' future. She saw Khal Drogo alive once more, holding their unborn child, a life that could have been. Love and longing nearly trapped her there. But Daenerys understood. These were lies meant to bind her. Calling on her dragons, she broke free. "Dracarys," she commanded, and fire engulfed Pyat Pri. The warlock burned, the chains fell, and Daenerys stood victorious. No longer merely the mother of dragons, she was now their weapon. Beyond the wall, Jon Snow found himself a captive among the wildlings. Ygritte, his fiery prisoner turned captor, watched with triumph. Jon's vows clashed with the new reality. He was now among those he had sworn to fight. Corin Halfhand, captured as well, revealed a dangerous plan. He instructed Jon to earn the wildlings' trust, even if it meant killing him. To protect the Watch, Jon would have to betray it, or at least appear to. The weight of that choice pressed heavily upon him, foreshadowing the path his honor would one day take. The episode's chilling conclusion came in the far north. Samwell Tarly and his brothers ranged beyond the wall when a storm descended. Separated and struggling in the snow, Sam heard a horn blast, then another, then a third. The White Walkers had come. Sam cowered behind rocks as an army of the dead marched past, skeletal wights, pale figures with glowing blue eyes, mounted on undead horses. At their head rode a White Walker, its gaze piercing the night. The army moved south, unstoppable, unfeeling, a tide of death itself. The finale threaded three major themes: death, from the phrase Valar Morghulis to the charred ships, fallen soldiers and the advancing undead. Rebirth, Daenerys reclaimed her dragons, Robb found love in marriage, and Arya stepped onto a new path. Fate, Stannis' visions, Jon's mission among the wildlings, and Sam's encounter with the dead all foreshadowed wars greater than crowns. The last shot lingered on Sam, trembling in the snow, as the army of the dead marched inexorably toward the living world. Their eyes burned blue, their swords gleamed with ice, and their silence was more terrifying than screams. Valar Morghulis, all men must die, and now the true war was only beginning.